Okay, let's get into this. We're doing a deep dive today into something fascinating. It's about that space where writing is really inseparable from survival. And it makes me want to ask you, the listener, what happens when your own lived experience, your politics, your identity, your whole history is just, it's too complex to fit on one little shelf in a bookstore?
That's such a critical question.
Yeah.
Because traditional genres, they often demand a kind of simplification, a tidiness.
Yeah.
And that can feel like a betrayal of the truth for anyone whose life has lived at the intersections.
A betrayal, exactly.
If you're neurodivergent, if you're queer, if your life doesn't follow a straight line, the existing boxes, they force you to almost amputate parts of yourself just to be categorized.
Right. And our source material today is a really powerful reflection by Jaime Hoerricks, a PhD, and it's titled The Shape of What I Write and Why It Refuses to Behave.
It's a great title.
It is. And the writing itself, which is called the AutSide, it's famously hard to label because it lives exactly in what they call the between spaces.
Where memory touches theory.
Yes. And the body is both a witness and a text. And history is sort of humming right beneath the surface of the skin.
So our mission here really is to unpack this phrase Hoerricks embraces, genre promiscuity.
Genre promiscuity.
We need to see why refusing to conform isn't just, a stylistic choice. It's a necessary strategy, politically, intellectually, for writing an autistic queer life today.
So we're not talking about a category you'd find in a library. This is something much more fluid, a kind of map of the self.
That's the key shift right from the start. What Hoerricks makes isn't a category, it's an ecosystem.
An ecosystem, I like that.
Yeah, or think of it like a shifting sky. A map of atmospheric pressures and fronts. It just refuses straight lines. It has memoir, critique, sensory notes.
And you mentioned an autopsy of systems.
Right, an autopsy of the systems that cause harm.
Yeah.
All of it in the same breath. It's an insistence on wholeness.
That focus on an ecosystem is so important because it implies change, movement.
Yeah.
And we have to trace how this voice evolved because it didn't begin this way.
Not at all. The source material talks about their early writing being all about compression, distillation.
Tight epigrammatic shards of thought. That's the phrase they use.
Exactly. Like an epigram brief, memorable, witty. The early work was just trimmed down to its most concentrated form. Clarity back then meant precision, intensity.
And this wasn't just a stylistic choice, was it? It was deeply shaped by their autistic sensing.
Right. The author explains that meaning for them arrives gestalt first.
Gestalt. G-E-S-T-A-T.
Meaning the whole thing arrives at once, like understanding a weather system in a flash. The details, the words, they only come later. So that early brief style was trying to echo that initial dense arrival of meaning.
It was trying to match the speed of thought.
Yes. But the really fascinating part is the pivot away from that, the move from distillation to immersion.
Yeah.
And they link this change not just to growing as a writer, but to a physical transformation.
This is where it gets so interesting and so embodied. The change is linked to transness and hormone replacement therapy. They say the slow unfurling under HRT, specifically estrogen and progesterone, literally softened the walls and widened the rooms inside their own head.
It's a powerful image. It suggests the physical change in the body actually changed the architecture of the voice itself.
So before, compression was a survival tool. You slice a moment into sharp, manageable pieces.
Exactly. But after the body transformed, the voice could take a longer breath. It could finally stay in a moment and explore its texture instead of feeling that need to just cut it short.
So are they saying that the physical change didn't just give them permission to write differently, but it literally changed the acoustic space in their brain?
That's precisely it. If your sensory reality is overwhelming, compression is vital. But if the body softens, the voice can widen, the acoustics change. It allows for narrative depth, which then forced the author to build what they call a countercanon.
Because the existing shelves, the existing genres, they didn't mirror this new internal movement.
No.
Yeah.
So they built a lineage sideways, a patchwork of permissions from, as they say, misfits and ghosts, theorists and poets.
And that led to asking a totally different question.
A fundamentally different question. They stopped asking, what is the cleanest version of this thought? And started asking,
what is the truest shape this experience wants to take?
And that question changes everything. It leads us straight to this core idea of genre promiscuity.
Right, a phrase that apparently started as a wound.
It did. Hoerricks says it was first a comment, sort of half analytical, and it felt like a criticism. suggesting a lack of focus. But after living with it,
They realized it was the most honest description possible.
yes, they reclaimed it with what they call unexpected tenderness.
I love that because it reframes what could be seen as a lack of discipline into a kind of fierce fidelity to complexity. The source is so clear about refusing to amputate any part of the truth just to fit on a syllabus.
And this is where the 5 languages come in. The writing uses 5 distinct forms, sometimes in a single paragraph.
Okay, let's list them. There's memoir, lyric essay.
Erotica, cultural and political autopsy, and spiritual witness.
Okay, hold on. If you're layering memoir with, say, Marxist analysis, and then you slip into erotica, isn't there a huge risk of just chaos? Of giving the reader conceptual whiplash?
It's the critical risk, you're right. But Hoerricks is adamant. There's no confusion and no contradiction. The coherence isn't structural, it's emotional.
So it's the emotional field of the experience itself that holds it all together.
Exactly. It's the gravitational center. The writing is a constellation, not a set of compartments. It's insisting on its own wholeness.
So the takeaway there is that emotional fidelity is its own kind of discipline. You have to trust the reader to follow that emotional thread, even when the forms are shifting all around them.
You do, and that brings us to the next point, because when that kind of writing comes into contact with publishing with institutions, it becomes political.
Which brings us to a harder truth the author lays out. Genre is never just about structure.
Right. The declaration here is that genre is never just craft. Genre is gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping.
It's the quiet machinery that decides which bodies and which stories get to be complex and which histories are even allowed to speak in their own voice.
So if I write a personal story about injustice and try to weave in policy analysis, the gatekeepers want to split it. This is too subjective for politics, or this is too political for literature.
It's a demand for simplification. It's a form of erasure. Institutions want linearity, a neat path from A to B, and they want neutrality, which Hoerricks points out is just the voice of the already powerful.
And the silencing mechanism is always dismissal, isn't it? If it's too embodied, it's subjective. Too political, it's agenda.
Too mythic, it's indulgence.
So when Hoerricks weaves memoir through policy, or lets the erotic sit beside the historical...
It's a political stance, a profound one. It's resisting colonial demands for a single story, ableist demands for linear thought, and the constant sanitizing of queer and trans lives. It's writing that refuses to be domesticated.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. Let's zero in on the role of the body here, because the author uses this phrase, the body, as archive and oracle.
Yes. In this work, sensation isn't just an interruption to analysis. It's a form of knowledge. Writing the material in the project called Sensual Residue is inseparable from the political work.
Because desire itself exists in a landscape that's been shaped by sensory realities, by deprivation, by gendered violence.
Exactly. So when the author writes about yearning or erotic clarity, they're also writing about what the system withheld, what the body needs to know itself again.
And there's that beautiful parallel they draw between erotic clarity and autistic clarity.
Yes, the voltage of truth when it arrives unfiltered. That intensity is a form of honesty that the world often calls too much. The body isn't stepping away from the political project. It's providing essential data to complete it.
Now, trying to hold all of that, the political, the historical, the sensual, it leads to a really key architectural choice. They separate the work into 2 projects.
The 2 branches of the same tree, yes. The first is the AutSide. That's the public-facing structural branch. It's about politics, systems, power. For instance, tracing eugenics through modern policy. It names the weather of the world.
And the second branch?
Sensual Residue. This is the quieter branch, closer to the skin. It's about sensation, erotic intelligence, the mythic. This one names the weather of the body.
But the author's very clear the split isn't fragmentation. It's a strategy.
A strategy driven by the current political climate, specifically by threats to label any trans content as pornographic and to ban those stories.
Okay, so it's a political firewall. By keeping sensual residue distinct, it creates a sanctuary. It protects the huge analytical archive in the AutSide from being dismissed by people who just want to label the whole thing as indecent.
Precisely. It's an act of strategic care to preserve the analysis while also tending the fire of the intimate. The 2 branches are always speaking to each other.
So the whole structure is an act of resistance. Let's pivot to the craft itself. How does this kind of writing actually get made? They say it's less composition, more attunement.
Since the knowledge comes gestalt first, the writing has to follow. You feel the whole shape before you know the edges. It's not about building an argument. It's about gathering a field, meaning emerges from that accumulation like sediment settles in water.
I love that image. It implies depth and layering over time. And the pacing itself is bodily. They write in breath lengths.
The rhythm is a bodily choice, not just a technical one. And critically, time isn't linear on the page because it isn't linear in the author's reality. There's temporal layering. A moment from 1997 can lean right up against something that happened last week.
And to manage all this, they use a set of internal prisms or lenses. They mention queer theory, Marxist theory, the PTMF framework. Now that last one sounds pretty clinical. How do you use that in a memoir?
PTMF is the power threat meaning framework. It's a psychological model that asks, what happened to you? Instead of what's wrong with you. For Hoerricks, it's a tool to instantly map a personal memory, not as a personal failing, but as a reasonable response to a structural threat.
So they're not switching between these lenses, Marxism, queer theory, PTMF. They're looking through all of them at once.
Yes, seeing how they refract and illuminate each other. And this whole system, this craft, it's all in service of a very specific offer to a particular reader.
Who is this writing for?
It's explicitly for those who live in the in-between. Neurodivergent, wanderers, survivors, dissidents. It's for readers who can hold multiplicity without panicking, who trust the resonance before the outline becomes clear.
And the offer is visibility. The source argues that the mainstream imagination struggles with a middle-aged autistic trans woman who is literate in politics, theory, embodiment, and desire.
There's just no pre-existing slot for that story.
So by writing the story, they create the slot.
Exactly. It shows what autistic, queer adulthood can look like when it's fully alive, fully complex, and fully mature. It's a counterpoint to all the flattened, infantilizing tropes out there.
The final invitation is kinship, but the ask is courage. Enter without expecting genre monogamy.
Right. And trust the truth as it arrives. Ultimately, the author says this writing is how they stay alive in a world that wants to flatten everything it can't control. They write against simplification because, as they say, simplification is how systems win.
So complexity in this context isn't chaos. It's a form of fidelity. It's being true to your own lived experience. The work has to continue because the world keeps lying, and that lie is always about reduction and fragmentation.
The political lesson is right there. Demanding your own wholeness on the page is necessary when systems are trying to break you into pieces. It's a refusal to apologize for the full range of your being.
So if you take one thing away from our deep dive today, maybe it's this idea of asking what the truest shape of your own story is. Where in your own life, in your work, your relationships, are you demanding a kind of linearity when the truth really wants to arrive like a complex weather system?
What is the architecture that your truth wants to take?
And are you brave enough to build it without genre monogamy?